everybody in the Win World. Once again, I am Kevin Mumphrey and we are in Nashville, as always, at the local distro. We're talking to another indie artist here locally in the Nashville area. Today we're talking to singer-songwriter Shawney Rainne. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. How are you doing? I
am great. So what got you in the world of music?
So I started writing pretty early. I was about 12, 13 years old, and it was a form of therapy for me, and writing poems eventually turned into singing and songwriting. So that's what really got me started.
So you wrote before you sang?
Yes. Yeah,
so,
I started writing poetry first.
So what got you from writing to saying, okay, I want to see if I can sing this?
Okay, so honestly, I found Maroon 5's CD, Songs About Jane, on the side of the street, and I listened to it, fell in love with all the songs, and learned verbatim each song, and that's when I really fell in love with songwriting and singing as an expression. And since then I've been trying to kind of do the same thing that they did, as far as like telling a story and expressing what I'm feeling through lyrics and song.
So with singing, did you start off with like singing covers or singing Maroon 5, or did you just go straight into your own singing?
I honestly went straight into my own thing. After listening to their CD, I was so curious that I was more focused on creating my own songs, and I think I've always kind of been that way. I focus less on the covers and learning other people's songs and material, and I try to kind of understand what I want to say.
Now diving to your own song, did it kind of help you kind of develop your own style or get you more confident into singing your lyrics?
I think what it did for me more so is taught me about myself and what I was feeling. And so when I mentioned it was very therapeutic for me, sometimes I would write things that I didn't realize I was even experiencing or feeling. And so that's more what it does for me.
Just now, you're from a small town in Illinois. What brings you from a small town to big old Nashville?
I have big dreams, and my town was a little too small for those dreams. And so I went to school in Missouri for a few years, and still kind of a small town. I went to school at Missouri State in Springfield, Missouri, and it had that small town vibe, that kind of southern vibe a little bit, and I just wanted something more, just more. And Nashville seemed like the right move, and I just got in my car and drove to the city.
So when you moved here, did it come off as overwhelming, or did you find the people here a bit welcoming?
When I first moved here, it was very overwhelming. It took me a few years to even admit that I wanted to do music, that I wanted to be an artist, because there's just so many talented individuals here. And it was scary. It was really scary, because I think, like most artists do, I started comparing myself to them, and I hadn't had a lot of training, a lot of technical training, and I felt like I was really behind. And so, yeah, I just kind of hid from the music scene for a couple of years. I'd say the first three or 4 years I was here, I didn't tell anybody that I wanted to sing.
So what made you actually give the confidence to start putting yourself out there?
I started meeting people in the industry that had already done it, and that were doing it, and they had faith in me, and I didn't have that in myself yet, but just them being so persistent and consistently showing up for me really taught me a valuable lesson, and that was just that if I believed in it, then it could happen. And so I started really pushing myself to get outside of my comfort zone and outside of my own fears and insecurities, and I would say about a year and a half ago was the beginning of that journey for me.
Yeah. So remember the first song you performed here in Nashville?
I do.
What was that song? It
was my song called Liar, and so I performed at Acme. It was for MTV, which is crazy. It was my very first performance ever. I was a nervous wreck. Pretty sure I took a shot of tequila right beforehand, because I was like, oh gosh, this is either going to be really good or really bad. I had just lost my voice. Yeah, and so I remember the producer asking me if I wanted to lip sync, and I was like, oh, I can't lip sync for my first performance in Nashville, and it's gonna be like televised. I was like, what if You can tell that I'm lip syncing. But one of my mentors, she created this concoction that was disgusting. It was like throat coat, cayenne pepper, lemon, honey, like everything just thrown into like this tea mix. And she's like, drink this, your voice will come back to you. And it did. It did.
So, like now, do you feel like more comfortable performing? Or you have a bit of confidence doing it now?
I have more confidence than I did then, but that was a big wake-up call for me that I had to either commit or do something else. You know, I couldn't halfway decide to be an artist. You know, I either admit that this is what I want to do, or it stays a hobby. And we performed, since it was being filmed for TV, we performed the same song 3 times, and by that 3rd time performing the same song, I felt myself letting go. You know, I was less in my head because I had already done it, you know, and I realized it wasn't as scary as I thought it was gonna be. And I remember that 3rd performance, I just was like, oh, I got this. And that's kind of stayed with me, and every time I perform now, of course I'm still nervous, you know, I get very anxious, and but I remember what I felt that 3rd time, and I remember that it's gonna feel good. I just have to show up, and I just have to start, and then usually after the first few seconds I feel good.
Okay. Now you also have this platform ABCD, but
EBCM, yes.
EBCM.
Yes, yes.
Oh, okay. Could you tell us about that platform?
Yeah, so EBCM is an acronym for Everything But Country Music. And essentially what we do is we create opportunities for creatives in Nashville. So we do live music showcases, poetry nights, festivals, concerts. We're trying to put together a comedy night. And we're just trying to build up a community of support for the creatives here that I think are so incredibly talented, that have kind of been pushed underground a little bit, but they're very much here, they're very present, and they're incredibly talented. Some of the best R&B singers I feel like I've ever witnessed.
Now, someone who's not from Nashville, when you speak of the music scene, they would think
country music.
Obviously.
Yes.
So, what would you say is the music scene here in Nashville?
I think if you're downtown on Broadway, absolutely country music. I think if you're on Music Row in that area, more of like where the labels are and like the business side of the industry, country music. But when you venture anywhere else, I feel like there's a lot of, like North Nashville has some incredible like soul artists, R&B artists. I think honestly everything is here. Everything is truly here, and not just here, but I think the talent is like surpasses expectation. And I think that's what is kind of pushed underground, because people think country music and that's it when it comes to Nashville, and there's so much more here. That's kind of what I'm trying to like highlight. Like we don't actually have we don't have a vendetta against country music, you know, we're not trying to like take away from that, because they already have a platform. Like if you're a country music artist and you move to Nashville, you have ample opportunities. But I know hip-hop artists, it's a little harder, you know. Jazz, R&B, like all of that, you have to look a little harder and do a little bit more research and do a little bit more footwork to find your community. And I think that community is very much present, and I want to play a part in building it up.
Now I finally want to ask you, like normally a lot of artists, well these artists back in the day, they just wanted to be artists and not want to deal with the business. Now you see artists, they're a little bit more, they know their business a little bit more now. So why do you think it's important for an artist to know their business?
I think that in order to get your music out there, you have to kind of put in the footwork to know how to do that. And I think a large part of the business is promotion, marketing, PR. All of that is, I know, not the most fun for a lot of artists, but I think it's important to at least learn, because we're in the day and age of the independent artist. And so if you're not willing to do it, another artist will be, you know, and not everybody's gonna get a record deal, you know, and streaming platforms and other platforms have made it so independent artists don't need a record deal. And so I think it's important to kind of celebrate that. You know, we're not at the mercy of the big labels anymore. Like we can do the same thing if we really take the time to learn the business, to understand how to get your music out there, how to get the streams, how to put together a release strategy. And it seems overwhelming in the beginning at first, but I think, you know, as you start like checking things off and chipping away at things, it becomes a little less overwhelming, you know, and it's, in my opinion, more empowering than anything.
Now, tell everybody where they can find you and your music.
Okay, so Shawney Rainne on Instagram. I'm very active there. Also Spotify and all of the streaming platforms, as well as Facebook, YouTube, all of them. Yeah, I'm everywhere.
Well, Shawney, thank you for talking to us today.
Thank you.
I'm Kevin Mumphrey with Win Radio, and that's a wrap.